The planet Darwin V was the universe's most dangerous laboratory. It was a world of hypermutation. On most planets, evolution takes millions of years of slow, painful trial and error. On Darwin V it happened during lunch. The primary inhabitants were the cracks, a species of predatory chameleons that possessed a genetic code so unstable and reactive that it was practically liquid. They didn't just adapt to their environment, they adapted to their enemies in real time. If a Crax was hunted by a creature with poison, its liver would reorganize in minutes to produce an antivenom. If it lived in a cold cavern, it would grow thick, insulating fur before the sun went down. When the first human scouting parties arrived, the Crax viewed them as a new, interesting challenge. They were soft creatures encased in metal shells, carrying sticks that spat fire and light. To the Crax, the humans were just another set of data to be analyzed, countered, and consumed. The high stalker of the Crax, a beast that had lived for 3 centuries by out-evolving every threat, watched the human landing from the canopy of a shifting forest. "They bring the light that burns," the high stalker clicked, communicating through a telepathic pheromone cloud. "Watch the light. Feel the heat. Tell the young ones to harden the skin. Reflect the burn. Make the light useless." The first engagement was a disaster for the human high-tech divisions. A company of soldiers armed with the latest pulse rifles and thermal lances moved into the tall grass. They opened fire, unleashing beams of coherent light and bolts of superheated plasma. At first, the Crax died by the dozens. But then the survivors began to change. Their skin started to ripple. Within minutes, the new Crax emerging from the brush didn't have leathery hide. They had shimmering, diamond-hard scales that were perfectly faceted to reflect 99% of all incoming laser frequencies. The plasma bolts, designed to melt steel, simply splashed off their heat-dispersing vents. The human soldiers panicked. Their invincible weapons were suddenly nothing more than expensive flashlights. The Crax closed the distance, their claws evolving into monomolecular needles that could slice through power armor like it was silk. It was a massacre. The high stalker gloated. "The humans are clever, but they are static. They rely on their tools. We are the tool. We are the weapon. We change faster than they can learn." But the Crax had made a fatal mistake. They had judged all of humanity based on a single group of scientists and technicians. They hadn't met the 82nd Ballistic Division, known to the rest of the fleet as the Lead Punchers. General Cannon was the man in charge of the 82nd. He was a man who looked at a laser rifle and saw a fragile toy. He was a man who believed in the 3 pillars of the universe: mass, velocity, and gravity. "All right, listen up," Buck roared, standing on the ramp of his heavy transport. "Those lizards think they're smart. They think they can evolve their way out of a fight. They spent the last hour learning how to reflect light. Well, I've got news for 'em. Light is fast, but it's light. It doesn't have any weight behind it." He slapped the side of a massive, belt-fed .50 caliber machine gun. It was a weapon whose design hadn't changed much in 500 years. It didn't use batteries. It didn't use cooling loops. It used copper-jacketed lead slugs and a lot of gunpowder. "Load the dumb rounds," Buck ordered. "No tracers, no incendiaries, no fancy smart chips. Just solid, heavy metal. Let's see them evolve their way out of a headache moving at Mach 3. The 82nd moved into the valley. The Crax were waiting for them, their mirror scales shining proudly in the sun. They sat in the open, mocking the humans, waiting for the lasers to start so they could reflect them back and enjoy the show. The high stalker signaled the charge. Thousands of Crax leaped from the trees, their bodies perfected to survive heat and radiation. "Open fire," Buck said, lighting a cigar. The valley didn't fill with the pew-pew of lasers. It filled with a sound like the world was being torn apart. Thud 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 thud. The heavy machine guns began to chug. These weren't beams of light, they were physical objects. Each slug weighed over 700 grains of solid lead and steel. The lead Crax beast, its chest covered in invincible diamond mirror scales, didn't even have time to be surprised. The scale didn't reflect the bullet. It couldn't. A laser hits the surface. A bullet hits the molecule. The diamond scales, brittle and designed for reflection, shattered under the sheer kinetic impact. The bullet punched through the scale, through the muscle, through the bone, and out the back, taking a fist-sized chunk of the perfected creature with it. What is this?" the high stalker screamed through the pheromone cloud. "The light does not reflect. The air itself is punching us. Evolve. Harden the hide. Grow more mass." The Crax tried. They really did. Their genetic code went into overdrive. The survivors retreated for a few minutes and emerged with hides that were 6 inches thick, reinforced with biological carbon fibers. They looked like living tanks. They moved slower, but they were nearly solid bone. Buchanan just chuckled. "Oh, you want to get thick, do ya? Gunner. Bring up the 20mm autocannons. Load the sabos." The humans rolled out the heavy stuff. These were shells designed to kill tanks. They were long, thin darts of tungsten wrapped in a plastic sleeve. The Crack's super armor was tough, but it was still biology. It was made of cells and proteins. Tungsten, however, is a fundamental element of the universe that does not care about your feelings. The 20mm rounds hit the evolved Cracks. The biological armor didn't just fail, it underwent hydrostatic shock. The force of the impact sent a pressure wave through the creature's liquid-heavy body that literally turned its internal organs into soup. The Cracks didn't die from a wound. They died because their entire physical structure couldn't handle the transfer of momentum. "You can't do it, can you?" Buck shouted toward the tree line. "You can't evolve a way to stop a 5-pound piece of metal moving a mile a second. There's no gene for invulnerability to physics." The High Stalker watched in horror as his invincible army was reduced to red mist. He tried one last desperate adaptation. He ordered his creatures to become small, fast, and nimble to dodge the bullets. But humans had an answer for that too. It was called a shotgun. The lead punchers switched to flechette rounds, canisters filled with thousands of tiny steel needles. The Cracks were fast, but they couldn't dodge a cloud of metal that filled the entire air in front of them. By sunset, the evolution race was over. The valley was silent, covered in a layer of spent brass casings and lead. The Cracks had learned the ultimate lesson of the gospel of momentum. Biology is a suggestion. Physics is a law. The High Stalker was captured alive. He sat in a cage made of simple cold iron bars. He tried to evolve a way to melt them, but he had no energy to work with. He tried to grow small enough to slip through, but the humans just tightened the bars. He looked at General Buchanan, who was leaning against the cage, blowing a smoke ring. "How?" the High Stalker whispered. "We are the pinnacle. We adapt. We change. We are the masters of life." "That's your problem, Lizard," Buck replied. "Life is complicated. Life is soft. Life tries to find a way. But a bullet? A bullet is simple. It doesn't try to find a way, it is the way. You spent millions of years trying to be the best at biology, but you forgot that the universe is made of rocks and speed. And we're the guys who throw the rocks." The conquest of Darwin V was completed in a month. The planet's hypermutation didn't stop, but it didn't matter. No matter what the Cracks evolved into, whether they grew wings, shells, or extra heads, they were always greeted by the same human response: a well-placed piece of lead. Humanity had proven the ultimate physical HFY truth. You can be the smartest, fastest, and most adaptable creature in the galaxy. You can have a genetic code that can rewrite itself in a heartbeat. But at the end of the day, your heart is still a pump, and your brain is still a sponge. And neither of them can survive the gospel of momentum. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. Evolution is a slow climb. Momentum is a fast drop. That if you enjoyed this kinetic victory over the ultimate predators, hit that like button. Comment below. Why do you think kinetic weapons are so much more satisfying than lasers in sci-fi? Subscribe for the next conquest of Saga 11, the Ghost Disruption. The brass is cold. The race is won.